next speaker is a security, risk and crisis management professional who's conducted and led high-risk, high-tempo security operations across government, mining and online retailing for the past 30 years. Let's welcome Amazon's country lead for security and loss prevention in Australia and Singapore, Lindsay Maloney.
Thanks everyone, and I've got that lovely presentation in the afternoon where everyone's had lunch. You've slipped into a coma now, and I'm going to try and just give you some thoughts that hopefully are a little bit challenging. The room, I'm pretty sure will be a mix of vendors and users. I am clearly on the user side of security, and so for my vendor colleagues, please don't take any offence about what I'm about to challenge everyone with and some of the lines I use in here. I just try to make sure that we remain relevant to our industry and to our customers, who essentially are our organisations that we are trying to protect. As was the kind introduction, I've been doing this for about 30 years in a number of different environments, military, police, intelligence and commercial. I've worked in mining, worked in casinos and resorts, and now in logistics and supply chain and online retailing, which is the Amazon job that I'm in at the moment, and have worked extensively through Southeast Asia and in the Middle East. So I'm pretty sure that when I put this particular slide up on the screen now, everyone will be pretty much familiar with what we talk about when we talk about an integrated approach to operational security. Operational security is really all-encompassing. It really does cover the end-to-end security aspects of any organisation that you're working with. And it's really, really key. That can be across corporate, logistics, mining, the medical community, critical infrastructure that we just heard in the previous presentation. All of these things do operational security because it covers end-to-end what we're trying to protect to make sure that our organisation operations continue to run. The integrated approach, like I said, I think everyone will be pretty clear on what that integrated approach is. And is there anyone that challenges what's up on the slide at the moment? I'm honest about that, if anyone challenges that. All right, well, I'm going to throw some thoughts at you because whilst this is accurate, absolutely, these are a range of risk mitigations. They are basically mitigating security risks that we've identified, and this is just an integrated approach about how to layer those on the organisation to mitigate all those risks. What I'd challenge you with is that traditionally, the security function has been seen as a support activity. That's mainly where we are. We're a red line on the ledger in a lot of cases, and it's really, really difficult to shift ourselves to something different. To maintain our relevance to business, and it's one of the biggest things that I do in Amazon at the moment, is to make sure that I'm relevant to the business. We need to make sure that we have a really good understanding of what it is that we are protecting and what it is that our core functions of our organisations are. And that leads me on to challenging you all with what it is to have integrated security. The slide that I've put up on the screen here now is actually core to business leaders. That's not directly in our space, in the security space. It's actually what business leaders use to design their business. And if you look at it, where the point of the arrow is at the far right-hand side, my apologies, as you look at it, that is where the output product of whatever your organisation is. And indeed, on the last presentation, you heard the two speakers talk about how their fundamental thing was to produce drinking water, as I understood that presentation to be, and protect the whole concept of producing drinking water. If you look at the previous presentation and then look at this slide, you can actually look at the supply chain, you can look at where logistics fits in, you can look at where HR fits in, you can look at where their people investment fits in, you can look at where their actual function also fits in on that model. And at the top, you'll see that there's the support activities, which are banded across the full business. Normally they are the support activities, and this is where security fits in. We are normally seen as a traditional support activity that goes across the top of the function. Now, I've drawn it there on this particular slide as being right across the business, but in a lot of our cases, I'm sure for people who are doing this as a living, as a practitioner in an organisation, you'll find that you'll get chunked down. There'll just be a little tiny piece that you're responsible for. There'll be bands that you can't get access to because that's not seen as a security function. My argument and my challenge that I put to you all is, how do you convince your business leaders that you need to be integrated across the whole business? And I'm going to try and show you a few tips about how we go about doing that, at least in what I do in Amazon. And I use this particular model. This is the one that they all understand, because when you go to a bean counter and you show them this model and you show them where you're going to fit in and add value, this is really, really key and really, really important. And I heard the last question second last question you asked was, how did you convince people? How did you get them on? And definitely change management is part of that. Socialisation is part of that. But also it's having an intimate understanding of what the business leaders are trying to drive, so that when you talk their language. And that doesn't matter whether you're a vendor or whether you're a practitioner. As a vendor, try and understand what your customer is asking for, so that is the output product of that particular equation, rather than trying to sell them a product that maybe just fits into a narrow band. Go to the far bit first. Now, in Amazon, we have things called leadership principles. If anyone looks it up, you'll see our leadership principles. We have a number of them. And one of those at the top of the list is called customer obsession. We are customer obsessed. And one of the definitions for customer obsession is that we work back from the customer. So that's why I'm a little bit passionate about this particular model, because if we work back from this, doesn't matter what organisation you're in, if you work back from what the outcome of your customer is and then apply security through it, you'll actually be able to do your job in a much more fluid fashion, and also be able to put your arguments forward, your business cases, your arguments for justifications for a particular mitigation, bit of expansion of capacity, whatever it might be. You'll be armed with the tools to be able to do that in a much better fashion. We need to support and enhance the business objectives, and we need to value add and be a business enabler. They are the 4 key things that I try to do whenever I can. A lot of you will have heard security as a service. It's become a little bit of a throwaway line these days, but it really does come down to, what are you offering your business other than just being a cost line on their ledger? That's what you've got to be able to put into the back of your mind, and that's why this model is so important. To maintain your business relevance, the first thing you need to do is understand the risks and risk appetite of your business. So what I've got there is 2 examples. And if you are sitting in an organisation and you don't understand what your risk appetite is, then you need to go and seek out, it's usually from your compliance, legal, or there'll be a risk management part of that business, which will have, as you look at it on the left-hand side, a well-documented, articulated threshold for where those risks lie and what their threshold is in their business, what they're willing to tolerate. So for Amazon, for instance, our big thing is to protect our people, and there's very few organisations who will say that that's not their main aim. We don't want to lose anyone ever. Our second thing on the list is our operations. A lot of people say, why? Why wouldn't you want to protect the brand? Because the brand is third. Our operations, the ability to deliver packages to our customers' doors really, really quickly, really, really efficiently, is what protects our brand. So we protect our operations at all costs. But every organisation will have their own views of what that model should look like, and it's fundamental to understanding how you roll, how you service your customers, and make sure you maintain relevance. On the right-hand side is a list of all the biggest risks as of 2023. For the Chief Security Officer survey that they did worldwide globally. And it really does articulate where everyone's thoughts are and what we're all worried about at this particular point in time. What I do with that one is, it may not be that your business has on the top of its list cybersecurity, albeit that it's a pretty big risk for everyone. That may not be your top risk, but what this does is allows me to go through, and allows all of us to go through and check off, do these risks exist in our business? And have I got them mitigated sufficiently? And in conjunction with your risk appetite, maybe we don't actually need to do anything about it. Maybe we're going to accept that risk. The business is willing to accept the risk that's there, and we move on without spending money. But that's a plus. That's a positive thing. You can then go back to your business and say, hey, we've done a really good job. We've actually looked at the risk appetite of this business. We're willing to accept that risk and we'll leave it as is. We don't need to spend any money unnecessarily on anything along the way. And that's what can happen in the security industry if you don't use a very sophisticated, very structured way of maintaining relevance to your business partners. You can start doing mitigations that you just think are right. But in their eyes, they don't have the justification for it because their risk appetite doesn't match where yours is. And that's why it's key to make sure that you've got that particular piece of knowledge to make sure that you're mitigating the risks according to their risk appetite. What I've put on here now is a set of core tasks, and that's driven from the slide previous. Security audits, I won't go through them all, there's no point reading them out. Most of us in this room who are practitioners, and even the vendors in the room, will be familiar with at least some of these, if not all. What we need to do, though, at this particular point is make sure that you are engaging with your stakeholders to maintain that and to understand whereabouts you fit into their particular organisation. If you build it from scratch, and I was very, very lucky for Amazon in Australia, our business is only, the retail business in Australia is only 5 years old, and I joined just on the cusp of when that started. So I was able to come into the business and have a very intricate understanding of where our risks lie and was able to very, very quickly bring into my umbrella of responsibility, if you like, the things that I knew were core and were really, really important to our business to own, as for a security function to own. There are some on this list that I refuse to own. I hand them off to legal. I don't want to own them. And some people get really greedy and they want to have everything. And at the end of the day, you can overwhelm yourself with risks that you're not a subject matter expert on. You may have SMEs that are working for you. You have to have complete trust in them. And sometimes it's just easier to go, okay, you know what? That's a risk that I don't want to own. Someone else in the business can have it. And that's being rational. But these are the core tasks. And I put them up there because if you use these as the fundamentals of going through your business, and again, going back to the RACI, going back to the understanding of your business drivers and where the outcome of that business will be, you can really, really quickly pare this down. But the one thing that you want to do is make sure that everything on that list, someone in your organisation owns. Now, it might be, again, going back to the risk that I was talking about before, the risk appetite, that you go, actually, we don't want to do travel security. We want to outsource that risk. We're happy with it. Maybe we don't have people that travel in your organisations. So therefore, travel security is not an issue. That's cool. As long as you can sign that off and know that that's not, that A, the business has accepted that there's minimal travel or no travel, and therefore there is no need for travel security, that's an easy one to sign off. But in somewhere like, again, my business, it's huge. It's a massive part of our business and it's a massive part of what I do. But this is just an example of how you can go through this list and, again, going back to your risk matrix and understanding what your business appetite is and what the outcome is of that value chain, you can very, very quickly determine what you do and don't want to do. From that, you can then engage with your stakeholders. And the stakeholders in any business is pretty important to be making sure that they're all online with what you're trying to do. Again, as a security professional, you don't want to be in an arm wrestle with, for example, the legal team. In my business, my legal partners are some of my best, I would say, work colleagues and outside colleagues as well, because we work so closely together. Once you drift into the space of compliance, which all of us are in that space now, you need to be picking and choosing who your business partners are. And one of the tools that is really, really easy to drive, and most people understand it once it's laid out for them, and what I would suggest is it's if you don't understand what it is and you've not come across it before, certainly just jump online, do a LinkedIn training or a quick university course on what's called a RACI matrix. That's responsible, accountable, consulted or informed matrix. On the right-hand side, I've put up another snapshot, again out of the CSO survey from last year, and it is actually a version of that, but again, they're using a different definition for the terms. But in a normal business, to be able to allocate with your stakeholders who's going to do what core functions, so flipping back to the previous slide, those core functions, it's really, really easy to start going through responsible, accountable, consulted and informed and you put that out there, get everyone to sign off on it, and once you've done that, it's okay, because if a risk surfaces and it needs a bit of a mitigation, immediately you can refer to the RACI and go, okay, who's going to go off and do that? And it stops the arguments, and indeed it stops the stagnation where a risk can sit there for, I think I heard before 6 months, where someone had let something sit there for 6 months. If you've got responsible marked against your name on a particular core task out of this particular way of doing business, you will get off and go and do that, because it becomes directly a KPI. That's how you feed that into the whole performance mechanism. And we would move from there very, very quickly. So I'm challenging you all. What I'm trying to say is this slide here, which is where the way that I try to drive the business in Amazon is that integrated operational security is across everything. So, for example, I'm in the human resources space because I look after, or my security team look after, the vetting. They make sure that everyone is vetted who comes into the organisation and are compliant as they go. We make sure in the procurement process that contracts, the external vendors, for example, who come and take our waste away, they are, and donations, so some of our expired stock, we will make sure that that stuff is, and it is security's function to go out and make sure that that stock is being destroyed according to the proper processes and is not resurfacing somewhere else for sale. We will take that particular part on. For technology assets, same thing there. We are in charge of making sure that all the cybersecurity compliances are in place. When we don't have, in my particular team, we don't have the SMEs. We have a branch of the business that is SMEs, but we have all the binaries. We hold all the binary audits. We are responsible to make sure that for enforcement, to make sure that compliance is done, and that's the way that we roll with the technology piece. So we are not a vertical, and we are not a horizontal part of the business. We are across all aspects of our business and from end to end. Some people, someone asked me earlier, I was having a discussion over lunch, was asking me around how many sites that I control. We don't look at how many sites I control. What it is about is how many miles that I hold. And what we do is we divide our business from the time that a product leaves our supplier to the time it hits the customer. We break it down into miles. And I look at all of the miles from there to there, and then the return leg as well. So when a product's coming back, how does it get back to us? And that's the sort of thing that we break it down to. And that's why integrated operational security, particularly for Amazon, and why I'm such a passionate advocate for it, is because I understand its strength, its relevance to the business, and the power that it has when you can go to the bean counters and be able to make sure that they get what you're doing because you're talking their language. You're actually able to plug into this particular model and show them where you fit into that model. I wanted to add on a couple of other slides that just give you a little bit of guidance on and a bit of an eye-opener on how I would go about making sure that this is in place. I use a capability maturity model, and what there are is definitions. You can actually plot these. If you do a search on the internet, you'll find some really good questioning basics that you can use to move up that scale. So what you do is essentially start out at a particular level. You do a baselining questionnaire, a baselining survey of all of your particular security functions. You then can grade it depending on where you land. It's done by plotting a histogram. I didn't want to go into it too deeply because it's actually quite a complex process to plot. But there are tools out there that do it very, very quickly. You can run those particular tools, the questions, across all of it might be sites, it might be miles, as in my case, it might be vendors, it might be contracts. And what you can do is look at the maturity of your model very, very quickly. What you do is you use that as a baseline. Obviously, there's gradings there. What I try to aim for, and again, we're a 5-year-old business, so we're sitting at around defined at the moment. I'm not saying we've got all the answers yet. We're a 5-year-old business in Australia. Yep, my counterparts in America certainly have themselves sitting at about 4. 5 is optimising. 5 is difficult to get to, and 5, you find that you peak into 5 for a period of time and then you'll drop back out. You won't stay in 5 all the time. It's one of those things because you'll optimise and then something will happen and that optimisation drops off, so you'll come back out again. But if you can sit in between 4 and 3, at the high end of 3 and into 4, then you're doing pretty well. And that's where the Australian business for Amazon is at the moment, is we're sitting on a midway on 3 is where I'd grade us at the moment, which I know that's where we're graded at the moment. But this is a baselining tool. You then come back and do it periodically. I follow this particular continuous improvement model. It's a flywheel effect, and basically it takes in feedback. After every event we do, we engage with our stakeholders, we take in feedback, we drive change, we do security management of what we want to improve, and then again, looking for those cost-effective solutions and then push it back in again. But we continually do that. After you've done that, and you'll all have your own continuous improvement models, and that's absolutely fine. But you then reapply periodically the capability to maturity model to measure as you're improving. Because if you're going backwards, then you're doing something wrong. And the first thing you should do is just put your hand up and say, hey, we're going backwards. We need to figure this out, do some root cause analysis, and then go back and repair what is broken, because you'll inevitably find that. And so I think I might have rushed through that, but I'm going to pause there. That's going to do it, and I'll take any questions, because I've essentially conveyed and put the challenge out to all of you about how to approach this. And thank you all for listening. I hope that was interesting.
Lindsay, thank you so much. That was very interesting, particularly saying that security should not be viewed as a support activity. Who would like to ask Lindsay a question either on the app or in the room? We've got one there. Please tell everyone who you are and then ask your question. Brenda's got the microphone right there.
Thanks. You talked a little bit about vetting your humans, which I relate to. It's a great thing to do. Do you do that internally, or you use an external provider to do
No,
that?
at the moment now we use 3 providers across the world to do our background checks. There's a big discussion at the moment about how we maintain that quality, because they're located in different parts of the world, and the different organisations are doing. We know for a fact that they're doing different depths, and so what we are really trying to drive a standardisation of the process. Amazon is a big beast, and one of the things that we don't want to do is take on extra functionality that is not our core business. However, we are good at doing that. We tend to go, okay, well, we're just going to gobble that up and do it ourselves. Vetting, because of the links into the community and to the police services and everything like that, and they're very geographical, they're very specific to those particular countries. It's one of the areas that we are probably not going to go near, and we'll probably always 3P, third party. But we are looking at the moment on just how we do that standardisation better.
Is that just to the 4811 pre-employment standards as per the government?
We go further than that, because we go to an Amazon standard. So we would do that, but we try to do the next level down. And that's because of the vulnerability of some of our sites have customer data. And again, we're trying to protect the brand, so we have customer data available. We just want to make sure that the people who've got access to the customer data are vetted to a next level down. And indeed, some of our contracts now are drifting in the defence space, and that's not saying anything that's not out there in the open. And we just want to make sure, again, we're standardising all that and trying to make sure that's pretty. And again, we're a 5-year-old business here in Australia. What's happening in America is they're all well embedded in this, but it's very American-centric. So now what we're trying to do is just align so that we're bringing the same stuff on board.
Interesting, thank you.
Thank you. I think we have another question up the back here. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. I particularly liked your slide on the maturity model, and I think a lot of people, I guess, don't really know where they sit, probably overestimate where they are. You mentioned that you're in the middle of, say, level 3. What are your biggest roadblocks from, I guess, moving from 3 to 4?
I would say to be quite frank, would be the guarding industry at the moment. Some of the performance we get there, the challenges we have with our guards are quite difficult to overcome. It's one of my biggest things, and I talk about building good business cases. I'm trying to build a good business case to maybe be able to pay more so we can get a better class of guard, and therefore we can do more and get leverage more out of that. It's very difficult to do, because that is a cost to the business, and Australia has the highest guarding costs almost across the globe. And so, per hour, per guard, it's very difficult to do. I would like to minimise that, but equally get the performance up higher. The other thing that we lack here in Australia, and this has nothing to do with our country, it's actually on the Amazon side, is some of the tech stacks that we're a tech country, but some of the tech stacks that our other regions have available to them are not as developed here in Australia as what they are elsewhere. And so I don't have access to all of the tools that I can use to apply to security. If I was working in Canada, for instance, or in the States, I'd have maybe another 50 tools that I could apply against security that are inherent to Amazon and we built in-house. And I don't have those, and that's a tech stack. It's just the size of the business here doesn't warrant them turning those capabilities on. And I'm hoping the business accelerates enough that, hey, now I can go, yep, turn that one on because we need that tool. Yep.
Thank you. Who'd like to shoot their hand up now or pop a question on the app? Oh, yes, we have one down the front here. Thank you, Brenda, getting the steps in today.
Thank you for sharing about your activities. I have been working on the banking environment back in my home country on similar roles, on cybersecurity risk management role, and I have to do something like capability maturity assessment, like you show here. And I do have the difficulty to visualize the business benefits when it comes to the investment. For example, we have to persuade the C-level on making an investment to a bunch of security measures. For example, the PAM, behavior adjustment tool just to protect the password. The privileged password towards the internal staffs. So I convey to the C-level that we have a bunch of critical information, and we have to protect against our internal staff. And we were struggling to visualize the cost and benefits. And do you have any insight about that, about making the business links to the security management?
So I just want to make sure I've understood your question, just to make sure. So this is about trying to get the password, so your super user passwords, selling to the business that you need to put additional security measures across your super user passwords in the banking environment. Is that correct?
It's one of the parts. Making one investment to the internal activities is a part of that. But for the other security management, answer to the external hackers, we have to always convince the C-level that we want it to be deployed soon. But they said it's not really the right time to do it. And we have to working around with the security measures, and we want to make a link between the business value and the security measures, and we don't have the really right framework to do it.
Have you been able to get your organisation's risk footing? So the slide that I put up that had the example of the risk footing, where everything is laid out at a business level, that is what they've accepted. That's what they've graded it as. And if you can get that, my biggest piece of advice is to tie that into your business case and say, here is what's going to happen if the risks you've identified, if that actually comes to fruition, here is the impact on your business. Because if someone can't see it when it's laid out like that, then all you need to do then, at the end of the day, our job as security professionals is to provide advice and the suggested mitigation, the most efficient and effective mitigation that we can provide at that time. And if the business chooses not to do that, we have done our job. But they have to make that decision. I sit there and I go, I have a seat at the table here at the board in Australia. I don't sit there and say, hey, you will do this. All I do is go, here's the risk. Here's the mitigations. This is what it's going to cost you, but this is what it's going to stop. And that's the best way I can advise to go. But if you use their own ammunition against them, and that's why I say if you go and find that risk matrix, which will exist for every business, and if it doesn't, I would be questioning that in itself. But if you can find that, you use that magic against them because they're the ones that have stated, here's what I'm going to lose if this happens, and then you can actually plug that in.
That's invaluable. Thank you. Other questions from the room or online? While you're thinking, I've got one of my own. Yeah. Amazon is a Goliath, of course. We've got people in the room from organisations of very different sizes. You mentioned up there cost-effective solutions. What are some of those?
Ooh, very, very challenging. What I try to do is at any point in time is trying to go, okay, can I put in a technical solution? I do for the very reason we were talking before about the guard costs. I try to avoid the guard costs because that is very expensive. So I'm always looking for fundamentally easy solutions to put in place, and very stuff for me which is scalable and sustainable. So can I put something in that's really scalable quickly, and can I put something in that's really sustainable and easily sustainable? I don't want to have a big long tail end of maintenance. I want to have something that's there and is really easy to keep going. Because a lot of the time, and again, no offence to the vendors in the room, but the vendor will give you a really good deal when you're initiating something, which is fantastic, but then there'll be the tailwinds of all the total cost of ownership which catch you out at the end of it. And that's where I always look. I'm pretty strict on, okay, let's just have a look at what the full cost is here before we jump into this.
Very sensible. Any other questions before we let Lindsay go? Please put your hands together for Lindsay Maloney from Amazon. Thank you.